I will go in part by his bio, although I know him quite well. He practices in the area of intellectual property and litigation as well. His focus is patent litigation, but he is actually a certified specialist in the areas of patent, trademark, and copyright litigation. His patent litigation has been with respect to many different kinds of technology, including vaccines, pharmaceuticals, genetically modified plants, microwave transmission devices, and others. He's acted as counsel in trials and appeals in matters relating to trademarks and copyright, and really all manner of proceedings before the Trademarks Office. And he also teaches widely at, he teaches the LLM program at Osgoode Hall Law School, and was often called upon to provide lectures in the areas of intellectual property, and is very knowledgeable and competent.
It's been my pleasure to hear Dom speak to trademark issues 2 days in a row, because just yesterday we were before the federal court as co-counsel on a trademark matter, and our opposing counsel had some very unique approaches to trademark law and urged the court to take trademarks in different directions. So I think Dom's presentation on trademarks is very much a stay tuned, because we may have some more interesting things to report in the near future. Now, do we have our...
Well, I do.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. I'm happy to be talking to you about trade secrets and patents. Trade secrets in part because I think it's the easiest part of the intellectual property spectrum to speak to. Trade secrets in particular, I think, are intuitive to speak to, because a trade secret is something that you use in your trade, and it's in fact a secret. Or another way is confidential information that you use in your business. It gives you a competitive advantage, but most importantly, that it is a secret and you can keep it a secret. This kind of confidential information can be specific, it can also be general. And the specific kind of information you can have as a trade secret can be something like a formula. And a very tired example in trade secrets is the formula for Coca-Cola. I don't know if it's in fact a secret, but of course the story is that it's a secret. It can be a device, a piece of computer hardware, a machine that's used in manufacturing or factory. It can be a process. That comes up a lot in pharmaceuticals, where to get to the end product, there's a complicated process that you use along the way. And this can be kept secret. General kind of information that you have that are trade secrets, your customer lists, your supplier lists, your pricing, and your business plans. Most, if not all, intellectual property starts out as a trade secret. It's an idea that's in your mind, it's an idea that comes out of your research and development group. Only you know about it, and it's secret to you within your business. And then the question is, in order to maintain the competitive value of that idea, is it best to keep it as a trade secret, or is it best to pursue another kind of intellectual property protection, whether it's a patent, a copyright, an industrial design, or something else? And it's really that it starts from the trade secret, and you take your decision from there. Now here's the trade-off of a trade secret. It can last forever. You heard Dom say that a copyright expires 50 years after the author dies, a patent expires 20 years after you file it in Canada, but the Coke secret, if you believe the story, is, I don't know, 100 years old or more, and it's still a secret. As long as you can keep the confidentiality, it's an eternal asset that you have. That's the greatest benefit. But at the same time, its greatest weakness is if it gets out in the public, once it's disclosed once by one person, it's gone. And when it's out, the value that's associated with that trade secret is gone too. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to protect your trade secrets, if that's the way you think you want to go in protecting your idea. I think the next 2 or 3 slides that I'm going to show to you, you're probably going to look at them and say, well, duh, of course I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do this. It's all common sense. But most of the time when I'm having this discussion of trade secrets, it's not with a group like this that's looking to protect your ideas. It's with someone in a litigation context who's concerned that someone has left, taken their trade secret to a competitor, and now they're trying to put the genie back in the bottle. And it's the better time is to have this conversation now, so you protect your idea and you talk to me in a situation like this, not in a litigation context. So 1, distinguish what material you have that's secret from that that's not. Easy. Buy a stamp that says confidential or secret or do not copy, and stamp things. I've said on the slide, do not overmark. Here's an example of a conversation you don't want to have in litigation. Someone says, all right, you've got a training manual, and you displayed that at a trade show, but it was stamped confidential. Yeah, but you showed it to people. Yeah. You've got some technical drawings, stamped as confidential. You sent those to a repair shop under no obligation of confidentiality. They could have a look at them. Oh yeah, 2 or 3 more examples. Now here's the document that's important. It's stamped as confidential. So how could my guy have known you actually meant it was confidential when all the other stuff you said was confidential you didn't care about? So be judicious. Think of what's really secret. Stamp that as secret and be careful. If it's a machine that you have that is part of your trade secrets, put a sign on it. Intuitively, something's a secret, keep it away from people that don't need to see it. If it's something that's on a piece of paper, put it in a drawer and lock it. If it's on a computer, put a password on it. Put a good password on it. If it's research and development, to the extent you can in your facility, do it privately. Don't use temporary workers, because of course, you want to protect your secret. The more people that have access to it, the greater number of people that are looking at it increases your risk that somebody's going to spill beans. So lower the number, and in particular somebody who's not your long-term trusted employee, but somebody that's going from job to job. And I think a real practical concern is, to what extent do I share this with my investors? And if you have VC money coming in, and they want to assess the value of your company, of your idea, do you show them the crown jewels? Now there's no easy, automatic answer for that, but it's a question to keep in mind. Do you trust the person who you're going to give this information to? It's a question to ask. And once you've identified the charm circle of those people who need to see the information, again, I think it's intuitive, tell them it's confidential. I can't tell you the number of times that I've had a conversation about this kind of case when a former employee said, I wrote that document, I came up with the idea, it was my invention, it was mine, I owned it. When I went to a subsequent company, because I owned it, it was free for me to take with me. Now they might genuinely have that belief, and they might genuinely be wrong. But the problem is your trade secret just walked out the door. So if you tell somebody that the idea is confidential, it gets rid of that I don't know defense. Hopefully it alerts somebody that they can't take it up with them in their briefcase, and if worse comes to worse and you find yourself in litigation, you can improve your chances of winning. Sign a confidentiality agreement. Hard to say I didn't know it was confidential when they've signed a piece of paper saying that it is. You can do that in a couple of ways. One is an employment agreement that looks forward. Whatever I create is confidential, I can't take it with me. Or you can also do it backwards. Here's an idea, describe it. This doesn't have to be a 40-page magnum opus contract. Here's an idea, it's secret, it's valuable, I won't share it with anybody else. To the extent you have to share your technology with other people, a subcontractor to make things, for example, enter into a license agreement. Tell them it's confidential, but restrictions on what they can do with it. Now, this might sound like a joke. So an Apple engineer walks into a bar. Well, it happened about a year ago. The guy was working on the latest version of the iPhone, out after work with a couple of friends, has a few beers, leaves the phone in the bar, leaves. And some smart person got the phone, put the pictures on the internet, people drew conclusions about what's in the new iPhone. Now that just illustrates how fragile trade secrets can be, because even if they had the advice, the confidentiality agreement, on and on and on, sure, the guy left it in a bar. And any value in the trade secrets that could be gleaned just from looking at the device were gone. So that's the risk of a trade secret. What trade secrets don't protect against: one, independent creation. So if somebody working independently, not receiving any input or advice from you, comes up with the same idea, a trade secret can't be used to prevent that person from their own independent creation. Also, you sell a product on the market, and somebody can take a screwdriver, take it apart, figure out how it works, they can recreate it, sell it, you have no recourse under trade secrets. If you have a patent, you can enforce your patent. If there's other industrial design, integrated circuit topography, any other protection that attaches to it, you can enforce that. But absent any other IP protection that you have, you're not protected against reverse engineering. Another way to look at it is you have your trade secrets and the risk of your secrets going out the door. You also have risk of secrets coming in. There sometimes can be a fine line. Courts have said that if you're hiring someone, they're entitled to bring their skill, expertise, and experience with them. But they're not entitled to bring secrets of their former employer with them. And sometimes that can be a fine line. If you're going to hire somebody into your own organization that comes from a competitor or somebody in a similar field, and they're going to be doing the same kind of research and development work that they did before, it's something to be careful of. Because you don't want to get the letter from the other side saying that there's some impropriety in the information that the new employee is using. So that's trade secrets. Now, I'm going to move on to patents now. How many of you either own or have applied for a patent? How many of you have seen one? Okay, good. So in terms of what it is, you can call it, a document that comes from the Minister of Industry of the Government of Canada, or a set of rights granted by the government for the exclusive use of an invention for a limited period of time. So it begs the question, what's an invention? It can be a product, it can be a machine, it can be a process, or any improvement on any of those three things. Now, not all patents involve complex science. Some of them do, but not all. Here's a issued United States patent addressing a problem I'm sure many of us faced, which is the quarreling kids in the back of the car. And the invention here is a plexiglass shield that you can put in between the two kids and keep them from squabbling with each other. And you'll see this guy over here, somewhat particularly upset that he can no longer put his elbow on his brother anymore. So I only put that up that not all patents are, as Don Cherry would say, rocket surgery. The number of the U.S. patent is 6 million and change, so there are a lot of patents out there. You don't have to have the acme of scientific achievement in order to achieve patents. At its essence, a patent is a deal. It's a bargain. And the bargain goes this way. You provide full disclosure of your invention to the public. And in exchange for that, you get a monopoly 20 years from the date of filing. So a patent is the absolute opposite of a trade secret. A trade secret, you don't want anybody to know what you've got. But with a patent, you have to provide full, fair, and frank disclosure of what your invention is. And in return for that exchange, the government gives you exclusivity. And the theory behind it, we can debate whether this theory is right or not, is that you disclose your invention, and then other people see it and say, that's neat. I know I can't do exactly that, but I can make it better. I can design around, I can improve it. Maybe I can get a patent on my improvement. And this encourages innovation. It encourages new technologies. That's the theory. So in order to have this deal go both ways, the disclosure in exchange for scientific advancement, your invention has to be at least three things. It has to be new. You can't go to Australia, find a neat product and say, I know that's not sold in Canada, so I'm going to go get a patent on it in Canada. No, it's not new. Not obvious means your invention can't be a trifling improvement on something that's out there already. And you think of this back to the bargain theory. If I go and find an invention that the public already knows about, I'm not really disclosing anything in exchange for the monopoly. If it's a no-brainer addition to an existing invention, there's no addition to the scientific field that you're applying for with the patent. Useful just means it has to work. You can't get a patent on something that doesn't work. Now, Chris here is going to talk more about patent applications, that process, what you go through, so I'm just going to touch on it in one slide. How it works. It's not an automatic process. It's not there for the asking. You file an application. There's a person called a patent examiner that looks at it and assesses whether it's new, not obvious, and useful. And that person decides whether or not you're entitled to patent protection. Country by country filing, which want international patents in the sense of one filing gives you registered rights in a bunch of countries, so you file in Canada, the US, China, wherever you see fit. In the US, I'm told by people smarter than me that my number's a bit wrong, 2 to 5 years. Depends on the invention, depends on the art, but 2 to 5 years is probably a better range. 25 grand, again, ballpark figure for your first patent. Filing in additional countries, there's going to be an economy of scale. It's not 25 as a guess times number of countries. And again, Canada, regardless of the subject matter of your invention, you're going to have validity for 20 years from the date of filing. I've talked about what a patent is. It's also important to talk about what a patent isn't. It's not a license. In some ways, a patent is a ticket of entry that lets you go to the Federal Court of Canada and sue somebody for infringing your patent. It's not a license to manufacture. There may be regulatory issues that you have to deal with. And Jan12 is going to talk to you about regulatory issues. it's not a guarantee that the product you make doesn't infringe someone else's patent. And Dominique was telling you all the trademarks, and that it's a use it or lose it scheme. You want to develop distinctiveness, you have to be out there with your brand. You can't just let your brand be in a drawer. Patents are the opposite. You get a patent, you don't have to do anything with it. You can just let it sit if you want. You can practice it if you want. You can license it if you want. It's up to you. The document itself of a patent has two very basic sections. Disclosure, and that's where you tell the world what the problem was that existed before and your great solution to that problem. And then the claims. And in the disclosure, you could really use whatever you want to describe your idea. Pictures, words, up to you. In the claims, numbered paragraphs, usually concise, no pictures, and you succinctly describe what your invention is. And if somebody else does what those claims describe, they infringe. And if what the other side does is different than the claim, then there's no infringement. And I think the easiest way to illustrate what a patent is, disclosure and claims, is to go through maybe an easy example. And what I'd like to speak to, I think, is a very pressing problem, urgent problem that confronts us every day. Just take out coffee. So, the old art is a styrofoam cup. Now it's great. It's lightweight, it's cheap, and it's a good insulator. So when you put coffee in it and pick it up, it doesn't burn your fingers. But styrofoam has CFCs that come out of it. It's environmentally hostile. Nobody likes styrofoam cups. So go and buy a coffee from Timmy's, and it's a paper cup. Great, cheap, lightweight, recyclable, it's all good, but it's thin paper. So when I pick it up, it's going to burn my finger. So then the person at the counter gives you another one, which is great. Now my fingers don't get burned, but I've doubled my costs of putting the paper cups in, and if I'm trying to be less environmentally hostile, I'm not really doing it by doubling up. So we'll go back to the Starbucks cup that Dom showed you. Great, it's paper, it's lightweight, but I'm still going to burn my hand unless I put this clever sleeve on it. So I put the sleeve on, and there, ta-da, I'm using less paper than a double cup. I keep my fingers away because I'm only doubling up where I hold it. And there's corrugated cardboard on the inside, so that pushes my fingers away a little bit from the cup, and I can take it out, no problem. So that's the advantages that the sleeve has over the other ways of having takeout coffee. So there's the sleeve, and if you look at the back of the sleeve, and if you're a nerdy patent guy like me, you look carefully at all this stuff, and there's patent numbers on it. So Starbucks, or the company it gets these sleeves from, has a patent on this sleeve. And the disclosure part of that patent is basically what I just ran through. There's a problem with other cups. This is a great solution to that problem. Here's claim 1 of the patent on that sleeve. And the language of patent claims, it's not Dickens, but here it is. So it's a recyclable insulating beverage container holder comprising a corrugated tubular member with cellulosic material, so some kind of wood-based material, at least a first opening for receiving and retaining a beverage container. The corrugated tubular member comprising fluting means for containing insulating air. The fluting means comprising fluting adhesively attached, so there's a glue in there, to a liner with a recyclable adhesive. So if another company makes a coffee sleeve that's described by that claim, they infringe the patent. If their coffee sleeve is different from what's said with there, then they don't infringe. But again, going back to the theory of why we grant patents, there's been a disclosure of this invention, and then smart people can look at it and just say, that's an interesting idea, but I know I can make it better. So here's another one. Another coffee sleeve, paper, but instead of having the cardboard corrugations that keep your fingers away, there's those little darts on the side, and that pushes the hand away. So what this illustrates is that Starbucks doesn't get a monopoly on all sleeves that you could put on coffee cups. They get a monopoly on a particular sleeve that looks like this. And then it's up to somebody else to say, well, I think mine with the little darts on the side is better. This is an improvement. I get a patent on this too. Not to be outdone, someone says, well, I've got a better idea. If I put a little notch in there, I use even less paper. There's no end of ingenuity when it comes to coffee sleeves. So just because you file for a patent on your invention doesn't mean that the world is going to steer you a wide berth. You're going to get exclusivity on the invention you describe and how you frame your claims. And it really is a science on how to draft claims. And I'm not a patent agent. Chris here, who you're going to hear from, is a patent agent. And that's the real skill of a good patent agent, is getting claims because you want them broad enough to keep your competitors away, but of course narrow enough to define what your actual invention is. So then you have to decide, if I've got an idea, what's the best way to go? Is it going to be a patent or a trade secret? So one, can my invention be kept a secret at all? If it's the sleeve, you're not keeping that secret. Now the glue that holds this together and how it's made and the formula, maybe, but think of it. Is this something that I'm going to have to show the public? Can it be reverse engineered? If it can be reverse engineered, trade secret's probably not the way to go. To the extent you can guesstimate, how likely is it that this could be independently created? How much is it going to cost to obtain patent protection in the countries that matter? How much money am I going to make from this? How much am I going to spend protecting it? Is a patent likely to be granted? Because patent applications are public in Canada 18 months after you file it. And you can wind up with the worst of both worlds. You'd think, well, maybe I can keep it a secret, maybe not. You file a patent application, your application gets disclosed, it's out there, then you don't get a patent. It can be an issue. What's the lifespan of your invention? If it's something that goes into a smartphone and it's going to be out of date 5 years from now, but it's going to take you 3 to get it through the patent office, is that you're going to treat that differently than something making mining technology that's going to be used for a much longer period of time? How valuable is the invention? That's the same as cost. And another way of looking at it is how easy is it going to be to design around. So those are some of the issues that you consider between patents and trade secrets. Unless you have any questions, I'll introduce Jim.
One of the techniques for getting around patents you said was reverse engineering. We have a problem now with the DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, all right, which precludes you being able to reverse engineer something if it's somehow or other encrypted.
Yeah, that sort of, reverse engineering really goes to trade secrets. So your secret has little value to you if somebody can go backwards and figure out how you got there. Reverse engineering, if it's, I don't know, a carburetor for a car,
Yeah.
that's something that if it's new, useful, and not obvious, it would be a good subject for patent protection. The DMCA, or the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, is a copyright issue, and that's putting digital locks on CDs and DVDs. And in the States now, it's prohibited to break that lock, even to make a backup copy for your private home use. In Canada, the Copyright Act hasn't been substantively amended since 1997, but it was Bill C-32, I think they're floating it back through again. There's proposals to amend the Canadian Copyright Act to put in that kind of digital lock protection into Canada. So what that really applies to, again, is CDs, DVDs, trying to prevent you from really disseminating copies of works.
I'm sorry, just to follow on, if somehow or other I had a digital lock, that was put on a physical item, because we're spanning the boundary between the physical CD and its actual use, which
Right.
has been prevented by a digital lock. I guess what I'm asking is that how far can we stretch that law or get around that when we're talking about reverse engineering?
Yeah, because I think it's most of the time when I think of reverse engineering, it's, taking a screwdriver and taking apart somebody's product and getting at it. I think what it gets to more when we talk about copyright infringement is, it's the right to copy. And once you break the lock and copy it, it's not really going in and figuring out how the software works. It's just making a copy. But I think that's one thing that's the tension between copyright users and owners. And that's been the fight for 10 years. But how far should we extend the rights of copyright owners to say you can't even break the lock? Because, of course, the government grants copyright rights, but now they seem to be delegating part of that responsibility to copyright owners to say it's up to you to put a lock on everything. I could go on. Sorry.
Is it a viable strategy to patent that which can be reverse engineered, the screwdriver taken apart, to patent that part? But maybe there's something inside which is a processor, an algorithm, and treat that as a trade secret?
That can be a viable strategy, but again, it's fact specific. It depends on whether you think somebody can reverse engineer it. If it's something that you think with no amount of time and effort, somebody can figure out how you did it, then that can be a viable strategy. But if it's likely that somebody could go backwards and figure out the way to go forwards, then it's more risky.
So my question is regarding the improvement. So if I take a technology which is used in one area, in one resource, and I create a new application of that technology, so would that be considered an improvement? Would I get protection or?
Yeah, new use for an old compound, in pharmaceuticals, for example, is a recognized way that you can get patent protection. There was a popular drug that was once used for just a heart medication, and then it was realized to have a certain side effect, and those blue pills have made Pfizer a lot of money.
Last question.
I want to know whether business process methodologies can be patented in Canada here.
Yeah, that's the time when I duck down and say that Chris will talk about the Amazon decision. There's been a big fight in Canada about the Amazon, the one-click patent decision. It seems that Amazon's patent just in the last couple of weeks was granted by the Canadian Patent Office after a decision of the Federal Court of Appeal. So it seems that we do have some business method protection in Canada. I hope, Chris, are you speaking about that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sure that between now and Chris might have some thoughts on that before I can get away with that as I'm handling somebody else's bio.
Frank, thank you so much for this wonderful discussion.
Thank you.